Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 686 of the Juicebox Podcast. So today's episode is with Lorie. She was diagnosed later in life, very much a surprise to her. But I have a little egg on my face today. This episode was recorded in April of 2021. For context, you are currently listening to episodes recorded in, I think, November of 2021. So April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 9 months late and over, I'm so sorry, Lorie. 13 months after she recorded this. Lorie's terrific. It's a great episode. She's got an engineer's mind, and it's interesting to hear her think through her diagnosis as an adult who did not expect to get diabetes in any way. Please remember while you're listening that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. For clarity, I just moved Lorie's file into the wrong folder, and just like that, it was out of sight and out of mind. I apologize to everyone involved. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by one of our newest advertisers, InPen from Medtronic Diabetes. Maybe you don't want an insulin pump, but you like some of the functionality that they offer? InPen is probably for you. Head over to InPenToday.com to find out more. The podcast is also sponsored today by the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. You're going to learn more at contournext.com/juicebox. There are links to InPen and Contour in the show notes of your podcast player and at juiceboxpodcast.com. If you can't remember, contournext.com/juicebox and InPenToday.com. So, no, you don't worry. You're fine.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm recording already, and I shouldn't say this probably, but my wife's been working from home now for 13 months, and my kids and I are just stare at each other because she yells, and we tell her, "You're talking too loud," and she's like, "Am I?" And we're like, "Yeah, you're much too loud," and she goes, "Okay," and 5 minutes later, she's yelling. Back before the world was a real place and people would talk louder to somebody who spoke a different language, like, that ridiculous thing you have. My wife appears to do that with Zoom. She just yells at Zoom like it can't hear her. So we've given up. Now we just snicker behind her back.
I totally understand that because my family tells me that I talk way too loud on the phone, that I yell at Zoom, I yell at WebEx. I mean, I'm super loud all the time.
I have to say that I'm I'm probably spoiled because it is my inclination to be loud, but I'm mic'd pretty well. So I can't be too loud because the microphone is doing a lot of the work. So I have to speak kind of calmly. But yeah, my wife is busy making sure that your COVID vaccine is safe and at the same time does not appear to know how to talk to people over a computer. So...
Well, let me know if I get too loud on this.
No, you're fine. You're absolutely fine. But if you yell, I will say.
Okay, great.
Thank you. You go ahead and introduce yourself any way you want to be known, and we'll just start off.
Okay. Well, my name is Lorie. I have had type 1 diabetes for about a year, almost 2 years actually now. Mm-hmm. I was diagnosed at 49, so clearly you can do the math, and I'm 51. And it's been very interesting the past 2 years. I've really had to try to, just like everyone who gets diagnosed has to come up the learning curve and figure out, oh my God, how am I going to manage this? And I guess, I don't know, maybe that's probably the best introduction. Yeah. I guess the thing that's interesting that makes, I guess, my story a little bit interesting is that I guess a lot of people that come on the show have lots of reasons for not believing or not understanding that they were developing diabetes, and that they had all the symptoms. I guess mine was that I thought it was menopause, which now looking back seems utterly ridiculous, and I should have known, but I just kept, thinking, oh, well, it's this, it's that.
Well, Lorie, I have to tell you,
it's menopause symptoms.
I've recorded about 500 of these, and you are going to hold the distinction of being the first person who thought that their type 1 diabetes was menopause. Congratulations. There's no trophy, but
well, good. Maybe it's not that common of a rationalization then.
Yeah. I mean, it's first of all, it's interesting to hear why you think you're going to be interesting on the show, because the thing that you thought is not what I thought when I read your email.
Oh, so, really? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, what did you think?
Well, so first of all, you feel a real need, which is somebody who's been diagnosed later in life, because I get a ton of emails about, can you please have people on who are diagnosed later in life and I respond to each one of those emails and I say, I will, if, I find people who've been diagnosed later in life who want to talk on a podcast about it. It's not that easy. I think people are starting to believe that I can just stand up and point at people and make them come on the podcast. So that's great. But also that you're an engineer is fantastic, because that thing that makes you good at your job, I'm wondering if it makes you bad at diabetes, and I can't wait to find out. Don't laugh yet, because I think you don't give away. Let's get to it. We'll build slowly. Also, Lorie, I know we're not saying, and it's fine that we're not, but are you, well, first let me ask you, you're comfortable doing this, right? You're not nervous or anything like that?
Oh, well, I'm a little bit nervous, but I also kind of feel like I know you because I've listened to so many podcasts. So I'm kind of like, Scott Benner, he's in my ears a lot.
Well, I'm just saying, I Google everybody that comes on the show at some point, and you speak in front of people. And I know we're probably not going to, maybe that'll come up or it won't, but there's just no reason for you to be nervous being on a podcast. Like, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
That helps. Thank you.
It seems like you've spoken in front of people before. So, okay. So let's go slow. How about lifelong? And really think about it. Any medical issues throughout your life?
Not really. I mean, I when I was a kid, I did have terrible environmental allergies, like, dust, pollen, that was terrible. And back in the dark ages when I was a kid, there were I had allergy shots like 3 times. And then, I had a lot of ear infections. So I had tubes in my ears 3 times also. So there was a lot of struggle with allergies until I kind of grew out of it. I don't know exactly why this happened. So, a doctor would probably be able to tell you, but, I had, I kind of outgrew it around 13 or 14. It all got a whole lot better. I just really didn't have problems with allergies anymore. Yeah. And then, through my 20s and 30s and most of my 40s, I was like super healthy,
okay. Well, a couple of things that are interesting. No
problems, really.
Yeah, a couple of things that are interesting. First of all, if you Google pollen allergies autoimmune, you're going to get a return back that says, in autoimmunity, there are different types of T cells involved. In autoimmunity, there is a different type of T cell involved than in allergies. In an autoimmune response, tissues deconstruct. But with allergies, the immune system overreacts to harmless allergens. So while it's not the exact same thing, it is your body overreacting to something. Because there are plenty of people who walk around on a summer day and whose eyes are not running and they're not banging themselves in the side of the head because of their itchy eyes and stuff like that. So I've always kind of thought of that as an immune response that's not quite right. Which I think is interesting. And you mentioned that they just went away. Absolutely happened to me when I was young. The worst allergies. Like, I couldn't go outside sometimes. My whole family would be outdoors. I'd have to sit inside in the air conditioning, stuff like that. And then one day it just stopped. And it just never happened again. It was absolutely amazing. And I watched it happen to my son very recently. He was fine until he was about 15, had terrible allergies for about 3 or 4 years. They just went away out of nowhere. And then a year or so later, he started having trouble with his thyroid.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy? So
yeah.
I just wondered. That's what I wondered, because you have a long life in front of you before type 1. Any other people in your family line with any autoimmune stuff?
Not that I know of. There's been some celiac disease.
That's a yes, then. Hold on a second.
But really, I mean, not, there wasn't even that, anywhere, not close relatives. Nobody close has had any of this stuff. There's been allergies. There's allergies, but but nothing terrible. It's not like you eat a peanut and you almost die. There's none of our allergies are that bad.
Yeah. But it is interesting that I said, are there any autoimmune? You said, no, just celiac. Celiac is autoimmune.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I guess I forgot.
No. It's not even that. It's that it's not, I think it's outside of the way people think about it. Like, once you have type 1 diabetes, you have in your mind the worst autoimmune thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is the bad one. But I think other ones, for some people, celiac's terrible for some people. And, that kind of stuff too. So there's a tiny bit of celiac. It's not right. It's not like your mom or your dad have it, something like that. You live your whole, can I be honest with you for a second? Like, can you be honest with me, Lorie? 49, you thought you made it, right?
Well, I got to say, getting type 1 diabetes at 49 did not cross my mind ever as something that I, skated past. It never occurred to me that this would happen because, like I said, nobody in my family's ever had type 1 that I know of. And I just didn't even, it never crossed my mind. Nobody even has type 2. Right. Nobody's got any kind.
And you're an active, fit person on top of all that. Is that right?
Yeah. So I've been doing, marathons, triathlons. I'm just generally, I just like to move around. I like to hike. I like to go on walks around the neighborhood, even, whatever, swim. I'm busy. So, I'm not overweight. I've never been overweight. I've never had any other real health problems at all. So, this came as a shocker, to say the least.
Listen, I'm going to be 50 this summer. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm down to worrying about, I don't want to have a heart attack. Right. I want to dodge cancer if I can. And then not a slip and fall, and then go as long as I can. Like that. Maybe I'm weird, but I've always thought about this stuff as I was getting older. Like, in your 20s, this generally happens to people. In your 30s, this generally happens to people. I'm even one of those people who's like, oh, your kid's turning 13? I hope they don't become bipolar. That's about the year when that happens. Like, I have very strange feelings about, so I just, as you ascend the years, it just feels like, wow, am I going to be one of the people who just gets old and dies? Like, that's so cool. Like, I can't believe I made it. Like, that's how it feels to me. But I don't know. 49, if I were to get type 1 diabetes right now, I'd be like, mother. You must have been pissed.
That's kind of, when I got out over the shock of it, I was, I'm like, oh, well, it's better than getting cancer. I did kind of go down that path then. I was kind of like, oh, well, okay, at least not cancer. And, I guess there's a whole lot worse things I could get that are not treatable. This is manageable. I can manage this, I'm not going to die. I just have a chronic disease I'm going to have to deal with. Yeah. Okay. Well, what do I need to do?
What did it look like when it started happening? What was the first sign, and how did you write it off?
Well, there were a lot. I look back and there were tons of signs. I just blew it off. Well, when I was 47, I was diagnosed, or I don't know if you get diagnosed with this, but I had the blood work and I met with my OBGYN, and she's like, oh, well, you're having hot flashes because you're in menopause. And, I went through that for several years, and I thought, oh, well, that's early, but, I just didn't, I was just sort of like, okay, well, I guess I'll just deal with this. And, everybody does that. So it wasn't a surprise, and it didn't feel like a health issue. It's not a health issue. It's just something you're supposed to go through. Mm-hmm. But I thought I wouldn't do that at 47. I thought I would do it at 55. But apparently it's not even all that early, but 47's on the earlier side of normal. So
gotcha.
I had that. So, everything was fine for a while. And, all of a sudden, I'm kind of 49, and I'm like, well, I'm drinking a lot of water, and I'm peeing. I'm having to get up every night and pee. And I thought, well, maybe I'm, God, it must be true what they say. You get old, you dry up. Look, I'm just old, and God, really? And I'm old and 49, huh? And so I kind of wrote off the water and peeing thing as, well, I'm somehow drying up. I'm needing more water now. And then the peeing thing, I was like, oh, well, maybe my uterus is prolapsing. I'm just old.
So wait, was that happening, or you just imagined that would be the reason?
That's what I was imagining. That was not happening. Okay. Everything is fine.
Hey, congratulations on that.
I mean, there was a little piece of me that was a little bit relieved, like, oh, okay, it's not a prolapse. I don't have any actual problems
like that
gynecologically, so that's good. But so I was kind of writing, that started to happen a little bit. Maybe I noticed it probably in maybe November or December, when I was still 48 then. Kind of around that time, I kind of noticed I'm drinking a lot of water. I'm peeing. I have to get up in the middle of the night and pee. And I thought, God, it's true what they say, getting old is not for wimps.
That's a boy thing though, mostly, right? Like the peeing in the middle of the night. Isn't that a prostate thing?
Well, I wasn't sure. I didn't know. I was like, well, maybe it happens to everybody. I don't know. I was like, I'm fine. What could be wrong with me?
Well, Lorie,
basically, I was like, what could be wrong with me? Right. I'm fit. I eat healthy. I'm not overweight. And the doctors tell you all the time, these are things you need to do to live a nice, long, healthy life. And I was doing all those things. And so what could be wrong with me? That's kind of what I was thinking.
I hear that. Yeah. I kind of enjoy hearing the story because it's demonstrative to everybody else listening that no matter what age this happens to you, most people are going to try to relate it to something else to write it off. It's very human and very common. Because you went all the way to maybe I have a prolapsed uterus, which, by the way, unless you say something more interesting in the next 45 minutes, Lorie's uterus is on the inside might be the title of your episode. And I don't think you want that. So, but again, congratulations on that one. But
yay.
I implore everyone who doesn't know what that means to Google it later.
Yeah. It's a thing. It does,
Certainly.
These things do happen. And, I've had friends that has happened to. So I was, you're
like, oh, this,
I don't know.
No, I
somehow
hear
it was in my head.
But at what point do you get it out of your head to come up with a reason and start thinking, I don't know what this is, but it needs to be attended to?
Well, there were two things that made me kind of start to get a little bit scared about this.
If you're injecting insulin, but have no interest in an insulin pump, and you'd like to have some of the features that insulin pumps have, you can with InPen from Medtronic Diabetes. You see, the InPen has an application that goes on your phone, and then it connects to the pen through Bluetooth. That gives you a communication between the application and the pen, and then suddenly, oh voila, you've got yourself some great functionality. For instance, the InPen can help you calculate the right insulin dose to take. When making a dose recommendation, The system considers your current blood sugar reading, estimated carbohydrate intake, and insulin on board. You can work with your doctor to get the device set up to help ensure that your dose recommendations are accurate. Here's something else that the InPen does. Dose tracking. That means that the system records your insulin doses in a logbook on your phone, making tracking doses easier. The digital logbook can easily be emailed or faxed to your provider before each appointment. You can also print a copy to take with you, have it in hand, as they say. Listen, I know you hear about people using insulin pumps and there's these cool features and you think, well, I'm MDI, I can't get that. But you can with the InPen. InPen also keeps track of how much insulin is still working in your body. That's your active insulin from your previous doses. It keeps track of that. And that helps you to avoid lows that may result from stacking. InPentoday.com. That's all you got to do. Head over there to get started. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to InPen from Medtronic Diabetes. What do your test strips really cost you? Could be that it's too much. Insurance may not be the best way to buy your test strips. Find out if Contour Next One and the test strips that come with it may be right for you. Isn't that crazy? That you might be able to buy your test strips in cash and it be less expensive than you're paying through insurance? Well, that would be worth looking into, wouldn't it? I mean, yes, it would. But what about if you're also thinking, I don't even know what meter I have. Like, what is it called, right? Maybe I have that one. I don't know. You don't. If you had the Contour Next One blood glucose meter, you would know. Do you want to know why? Because every time you looked at it, you would think, this is the best damn meter I've ever seen in my life, and it's super accurate, and I'm super excited, which is almost word for word what I think every time I see Arden's Contour Next One meter. Really is super easy to hold, to use at night or during the day. It's got a bright light. It's got a great screen for reading, even in the sunshine. The testing is accuracy personified. It's just the most accurate meter I've ever used. The test strips are fantastic. They offer second chance in case you hit the blood but don't get enough. You can go back in, get more without ruining the test strip or the accuracy of the test. It's a big deal. I don't think enough of us put effort or time into knowing about the meter that we have. Mostly it's just this thing the doctor gives you and you take it and don't think twice. But you could make the tiniest effort and get yourself a great meter, an accurate meter, the Contour Next One. Go to contournext.com/juicebox. You can buy it right there on that link or find out more. Check into how much the test strips might cost you in cash. It's maybe one of the best setup websites I've ever seen.
I was on vacation with my family. I have a husband and two kids, and they're teenagers. So we were on vacation and we were driving. We had we were driving from one place to another on this vacation. And before we got in the car, I had a cheeseburger, fries, and a Dr. Pepper. And it wasn't like supersized any of those things. I just regular size.
Yeah.
I had lunch. And in the car, we got in the car and then we were driving. And I realized I am so thirsty. I drank my water bottle. I drank my husband's water bottle, and I took the water bottles away from both of my kids. So I drank a gallon of water to follow up that. I mean, it was literally a gallon of water.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have to
fight off a burglar. Say something.
I have to fight off an impending low. Let me
go ahead.
Let me have a couple of Skittles here.
Take your time. What's your blood sugar?
Well, it's 91, but I am double down.
Wow.
So,
is this adrenaline? Does adrenaline hit you like this? Some people it gets backwards. It doesn't drive them up, it drives them down. No?
Probably not. I usually go up when I'm nervous.
Okay.
But what happened was I just had breakfast and
Yeah.
I may have missed my bolus. I over bolused maybe a little bit for
Lorie,
it.
I have to tell you while you're chewing on your Skittles that I've come to realize that the older type, like the adult type ones that come on, even some of the kids, they don't want their blood sugars to be high when they're on the podcast. I didn't realize that until a couple of people started mentioning it over and over again. Did you have any pressure like that? Like, I don't want my blood sugar to be out of range while I'm talking about my diabetes?
I did not want it to. Yes, I did not want my Dexcom alarm to go off during the. Yes, for sure.
Because of the beeping, or because you didn't want me to think that you weren't in range?
Yeah, I didn't want you to think that I
right.
didn't have things under control after having listened to 300 episodes of the podcast.
300, Lorie, they're 460. You better keep moving.
Oh,
but
okay.
Let's say while Lori's again eating her Skittles, please stop doing that when you guys come on the show. You really don't have to. It's okay. One time somebody's just going to pass out and be like, I was very aggressive before I was on the podcast. That is not necessary, but I appreciate everyone's feelings, but you don't have to do that. Take your time.
Well,
let's stop your double arrows down first. And how well does Skittles work for you?
Oh yeah. Skittles are the best.
Like, you feel very comfortable about the treatment you just made even for 91, 2 down?
Yeah, I had how many did I have? I had about 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually do that to get it to flatten out and then see what happens. Because if I eat 10 or 15, sometimes it's too much. So
gotcha.
We'll see. Double down is not a good place, but now I'm starting. Okay. So yeah, now I'm 84 and diagonal down. So I probably ate about the right amount.
Good for you.
So it was going to slow down anyway. So.
All right. And you feel okay?
I'm good.
All right. How did you figure out how to do that? Did the podcast help you figure that out?
Oh, of course. Well, yeah. I mean, you don't have to stick to this stuff they tell you, like, well, you got to have 15 and wait 15 minutes. And, you don't have to stick to any. The podcast helped me kind of relax and be like, hey, you don't have to follow these rules. You can figure it out for yourself. And then, now sometimes I screw it up real bad. No, sure. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, of course. Everyone messes it up. That's, that just happens. I've gotten Arden through pasta the last couple of days really well. And I was like, wow, I was even like just happy when it was over. Like I wouldn't want people to think that it's just like, oh, okay, this one. I mean, she ate something difficult and I thought, I hope I get this right. And it worked out. And I was like, yay, it's not easy. But so you're basically, even though you're 2 hours down, you're using like bumping techniques. Like, you're just trying to bump yourself back up. You're giving yourself enough of something to stop the arrows without over treating yourself. That's the goal right here.
Oh yeah. That's always the challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I've had enough. I guess I've messed it up enough to know not to overtreat that.
Yeah.
Because then you end up kind of going up and down, and it's just awful.
Yeah, the chasing's I think chasing is the worst thing that you can do, because you can never win when you're chasing, unless you're just like really so good at it that you can. I mean, there's a way to stop those bounces, but it's not easy to do if you don't understand the whole thing. And it comes in time. Like, in time, everybody can figure out how to do it. But in the beginning, if you're chasing, you'll chase forever. And I see it happen. There are some people who will get caught in that loop and never get out of it their whole life. Just, this is diabetes. I'm always flying up, or I'm always flying down. I'm always scared, or I always don't feel good. So it doesn't need to be that way. So I'm sorry. So the question, are you okay?
So anyway,
the question? No, this was great. Listen, if you can't have a low blood sugar on this podcast, there's nowhere in the world for you to do it. So this is
that's true. I mean, everybody's going to understand this.
Yeah. There's not one person judging you right now. Everybody's just like, oh, Lori's low. We'll wait for the answer to that question. It's fine. Yeah. So the question really is what pushed you to actually go to a doctor and say, hey, I don't know what's happening to me?
Yeah. Okay. So one part of the story was, I realized that day I was sitting in the car and I drank everybody's water. I took water away from my children. That's how bad it was.
You're not thirsty. Like, Mommy's thirsty.
You are not as thirsty as me. So, and then of course we had to stop 3 times so that I could pee, of course, that was so then I was kind of like, man, that's weird. That is weird, but I kept thinking, well, that's weird. And because it was so dramatic that time, I was like, wow, that's dramatic. Okay. The second thing that happened, was that when we were on that same vacation, I was like, man, my jeans are loose. What is with this? Am I losing weight?
Right.
So, and my husband was kind of like, yeah, maybe you are losing weight. You do seem a little thin. But, we don't have a scale. We don't have a scale because we're active. My weight has been really, really stable for a really long time. And we just don't have a scale at the house. Yeah. So I never weigh myself. But when we were on vacation, the gym at the hotel had a scale. And I'm like, I'm going to step on the scale and see what my weight is.
Right.
So I stepped on the scale and I'm like, so I'm 5'5", and my normal weight is about 125, 130. Mm-hmm. So, I'm thin, but I'm not super skinny.
Right.
And so I get on this scale and it reads 115. So I'm like, oh, I'm quite a bit. Yeah. I've lost some weight. That's why my jeans don't fit,
right.
Now,
10 pounds on your frame would be obvious, I would think. It's just tough when you're around people all the time. It's hard to see. You know what I mean? When you see somebody every day, you don't notice it. Like Arden I look back now and Arden looked like a 2-year-old runway model. Like you could see her ribs, and it was shocking to look back on it afterwards, but I couldn't somehow see it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think my husband didn't notice either because it was just gradual. It was over a period of time or whatever. And my kids, of course, didn't notice. They're teenagers. They have better things to worry about. And then, I didn't notice until my jeans were loose, and my clothing not fitting is a big noticeable thing.
Right.
So,
but then does that make you think I have cancer?
Well, it made me think that, that is not a symptom of menopause.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
I'm like, I don't think weight loss is part of something that happens in menopause or age or whatever. I'm like, everybody that I know that has gone through menopause, they got heavier, not less heavy. They didn't lose weight.
This is your engineer brain, Lorie. You realize that, right? That you're not leaping. You're walking through step by step. You're lucky you didn't kill yourself going through the 9,000 steps that were possible before you got to what you figured out. You're like, okay, check that off. That didn't work. Now we're going to turn screw number 3, 6, 7,000 to see what happens there. Like you really are going through it so slowly, but I imagine that's what makes you good at your job. But yeah. So, okay. So menopause, weight loss doesn't come with menopause. I'm going to go to the doctor.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm eating 6 more Skittles.
Go ahead. Hey, listen.
To make sure that this flattens out.
I want to tell you, no one's ever passed out on the show, but
good.
I do believe it would be a ratings grabber. So but I don't want you to do it. Are you okay? Do you need
yeah.
You're all right?
I'm just still diagonal down. And
are you 74 now?
I'm 78 diagonal down.
Is anyone
so I'm really
impressed
still
that
fine.
No one's, Lorie, you're in an emergency situation, so you don't have time to be impressed that I knew your blood sugar, even though I don't know you, just from the scenario. But the people listening right now are like, God damn, Scott knew her blood sugar.
I know, that's pretty good.
Thank you.
If you're diagonal down, we can calculate in the amount of time we've been talking what her blood sugar probably is at this point.
Again,
that's pretty good.
That's fascinating between you and I. I didn't calculate anything. I'm unaware of the time. I just have a feeling for it. Like when you were stopping double arrows down with that many Skittles, I thought that's probably not going to work. And then you leveled out, and I was like, all right, maybe she knows better than I did. But then when you said you were going for another Skittle, I was like, yeah, she's got to be 20 points lower now. Like maybe 15 to 20 points lower now. And it's a diagonal down arrow, because you did take the ass out of those arrows a little bit. Like you took some of the momentum out of it, but you didn't squash it. So you still have, if you did 7 and maybe 7 more, do you know your carb ratio off the top of your head?
At this time of day, let's see, it's 9:30. This time of day, I'm 6 to 1. So it's
6 to 1.
But
so I'm going to say you probably used 2 units too much in your meal, or you didn't pre-bolus enough and you used a little too much. Which do you think?
Well, I was high at the start of my meal. So I was like, so I went up. So it was a complicated morning for me, which is why this is happening.
Sure.
So I swam this morning.
Okay.
And then, it was a short swim, but it was still 30 minutes with insulin off. Mm-hmm. And then, what happens always immediately after, I plug back in and then I bolus, because you have to bolus the missed basal. And then, that I miss a lot. And then I was nervous about the show.
Okay.
So there was a little adrenaline, so that drove it a little higher after the swim. And then I was 240. So then
you bolused
also wanted
the
to
adrenaline,
eat.
and
so
then you and I started talking, and you got more comfortable, and the adrenaline part went away, and you still had the insulin left over, plus the meal bolus.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, that's probably what happened. Yeah.
Lorie, just say no if it's not okay. But can I say where I think you work?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to mention that later, but
all
yes.
Right, let's get to it now, because it's insane that you're nervous. Do you work at NASA?
Yeah. So I work at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is a NASA laboratory.
JPL. Yes. Yeah. Right. That's where you're at?
Yeah. The Jet Propulsion Lab. So it's in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I worked on, I actually work, with people from all over NASA. And so, I do contribute to the human spaceflight aspects, and then also the stuff that JPL does in-house, which is the Mars missions and all the robotic missions that JPL does, that you often hear about on the news and stuff. So it's fun. It's a fun job. But
you were nervous about coming on my Rinky Dink podcast about type 1 diabetes?
Yes, because I'm like, well, I'm new to diabetes. I'm like,
that's fascinating.
I've been doing engineering for a long time for NASA, and that's just, a day at the office. But this is new.
But engineering about rockets that shoot people into space, not like engineering about whether my door unseats when I crack the door handle on my car or not. Like you see what I'm getting at, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It does require some much more precision. Yes.
You would imagine. How did I do with my interview with April? Did you hear it?
Yeah. Was she the one that was at Johnson Space Center? She's the one in Houston.
Yeah. She was the attitude
I did hear that one.
On control officer. Yeah. Was I too geeky about space there? Do you think?
It was fine. I thought that was fine. It was a really interesting podcast. Actually, the area in which she works, the mission control aspects, I don't know anything about that. All of that stuff, it was really interesting how she got into that, and her work. I thought, that was a great one. I did hear that one.
I just wanted to know if you were just like, it was terrible. You did such a bad job. Asked all the wrong questions.
No.
But your engineering brain is so obvious here. So,
is it? Okay.
It really is. So and the part that's fascinating to me is I don't understand why you like the podcast if that's how your brain works. How are you and I jiving together? This is the thing I'm really interested in.
I don't know. Actually, I haven't ever thought about that.
Yeah, you don't think in pictures, right?
I don't think in pictures. It depends. Well, graphs. Yeah.
So is there a
I
part
do
of me that's
think
technical
really,
enough that do you see what I'm saying? Like I talk about like, I don't know, use more insulin, bump it back this way, nudge it over there. Like none of that is how your brain works for engineering. And it seems in your personal life, because we kind of listened to you try to figure out that you had diabetes the way an engineer would try to figure something out. And so then you bump into a podcast where a fast talking guy who doesn't have type 1 diabetes is saying things like, oh, just trust that you know what's going to happen is going to happen. And you're like, right on. I don't understand how you didn't go, no, this isn't for me. I got to go.
well, I guess I don't think your show is not technical. I think it is technical. I think, I mean, well, I'll tell you what I don't like, and your show doesn't do this. What I don't like is, the minimal to zero information that I got from my endocrine, from the medical establishment, I guess.
Right.
Take 15 grams of carbs to get over your low and wait 15 minutes. Well, I did that at first, and that's terrible. I'm like, that doesn't work at all. Your way, sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes it's enough.
Right.
And sometimes it's way too much. And so, I guess what I feel like I learned from the podcast is really the idea that no, go and figure out what is working for you and what's not, and pay attention to what happens when you take more carb. When you're watching your Dexcom data, you're watching yourself drop, look at, how fast are you dropping?
Mm-hmm.
And, what has happened in the past, and try to figure out, okay, what makes sense for me to do in the next 10 minutes to fix this, either go up or go down or whatever, but don't just be static about it. So I guess that idea is not in the medical establishment. I mean, they want to give you a formula, which, when you're first diagnosed, a formula makes sense and is easy to understand and people can connect with it. But really, there's a lot more sophistication, and, even if it is a experiential sophistication that you get by just testing things out with yourself. I mean, that's much more engineering than a cut and dried formula that you would learn in maybe the 9th grade.
So when somebody hands you a formula and it doesn't prove, then you don't trust it anymore, and it doesn't work.
Right.
And that's it. How are you? How's your blood sugar, by the way?
It's funny because, gosh, I was like, wow, can he see me swiping my phone to get my
I can hear your concern, and you stammered a couple of times, which you didn't do in the first 20 minutes. So that's why I'm asking if you're all right.
Oh, I am fine. Well, what do you think it is? Let me ask you.
Right.
Maybe you can.
Well, so how many Skittles did you have the second time?
I think I had 5 or 6.
I'm going to guess you're 85 to 89 and stable.
Okay, I am stable,
Okay.
but I leveled out at 77.
You're 77 still. Okay, let's see what happens.
So I'm level at 77, which is good. But no,
Did you check with a
do
meter?
a lot of,
or do you?
I do a lot of hesitating in my speech anyway, so that may not be related to a low or anything.
Good. Do you want to check with a meter, or are you comfortable?
Oh no,
You're good.
The Dex is always accurate. So
look at you loving Dexcom. Good. Excellent. Dexcom.com /. So
well, if they need me to talk them up, I will.
well then, so you go to the hospital, you get diagnosed, they don't give you great information. You leave with needles and a meter?
Oh, no, it was nothing like that.
No?
Actually, I called my general doctor and said, I need to come in. They were like, okay, you can have an appointment in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, I went in, And then what happened from that point forward was extremely similar to another guest that you had on that was diagnosed at 44. I think her name was Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that episode just came out a couple days ago or last week. But anyway, I went in. They were like, "Oh, you're really healthy. You look great. You're not overweight." They checked me for all the same stuff I had been thinking about, that I knew were good.
Mm-hmm.
You look great. Why are you here? And I'm like, well, I've been peeing a lot, and I also drank a lot of water, which, maybe I'm just old. When I was in there, I kind of wanted to poo-poo it because it sounds so ridiculous, right?
Saying
I'm peeing a lot and I'm drinking a lot of water. But then, I realized I had lost about 15 pounds. And the doctor got up and ran out of the room and yelled at the nurse, "Can you bring a blood meter in here?"
Mm-hmm.
Came in, took my blood sugar. I go, "Oh, it's 413. So he looks at me and he says, "Well, you have diabetes." And I'm like, "What?"
But I didn't do the stuff they said not to do. What the hell?
Yeah, I
would imagine that's how a non-smoker feels when they get lung cancer. They're just like, "Wait, are you kidding me? Like, I didn't do the thing that's supposed to make this happen." And God, how was it in that moment? He says those words. How do you feel?
I wanted to tell him that was ridiculous. I was like, there's no way that I have diabetes because I didn't know anything about diabetes. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I ran a marathon 3 months ago, and I swim, I bike, I triathlons, I'm active.
Right.
I'm not overweight. I'm thinking, I was like, there's no way I have diabetes. And so what I actually said to him was, well, isn't there more to this diagnosis? I mean, you just check my blood sugar with a meter. Isn't there more you need to do to diagnose it? And he was like, nope.
Sorry, lady, you have diabetes.
Great. I mean, I was like, well, that can't be right. And he looked at me and he goes, I really don't think you have type 2, but I don't know. And I'm going to have, and I'm like, type 2, type 1, I was confused. I had never researched this. Right. I kind of vaguely heard about this.
But diabetes, Wilford Brimley, that's what you know.
Yeah. Oh, right.
It's a guy, kind of looks like a walrus with a big mustache. He has diabetes. That's diabetes. I don't know what the hell the rest of this is. That's interesting. Yeah, no. So what'd he do? He went and looked for antibodies.
He didn't say anything. He goes, well, look, come back tomorrow. We do blood work here in the office. Come back in the office and we'll do a blood draw, make it a fasting blood draw. So I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, how can you check my cholesterol too, while you're at it? Cause 49.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, of course. So I go in, I get my blood draw, and he's like, okay. 2 days later, he calls me and he says, you need to come back in. So I go back in. He's like, well, your A1C is 13.1. So your blood sugar has been real high for a real long time. Mm-hmm. So you are pretty sick. Do you feel okay? And I'm like, I guess, what do you, he's like, are you tired? Do you feel nauseated? Do you feel anything,
I would have said, I feel irritated. You didn't ask me this 2 days ago. I can tell you that much.
Well, and then there was a beat, there was like a pause in the conversation. He's just looking at me and I'm like, I feel okay, whatever. I got to go pick up my kids. So, is there something I should do? And he looks at me and he says, I'm trying to decide if I should send you to the hospital or not.
Right.
And I'm like, the hospital? That's ridiculous. I walked in, I drove over here, walked in the office. Why would I need to go to the hospital? Well, so he's like, he just said, okay, I need you to contact, here's an endocrinologist. I know this, he talked about he knew this endocrinologist. So call them, see if you can get an appointment as soon as humanly possible. And I want to see you in 3 days. Oh, okay. And don't eat any carbs at all. Eat no carb. You can have no sugar and no carbs. I'm like, okay, so, does that just leave me with bacon or?
Yeah, exactly. Celery and ham? Is it celery and ham I'm eating? Like, could you be more specific?
Yeah.
Especially you just asked about your cholesterol too. He's like, go home and have a cheeseburger. Don't put it on a roll.
Yeah, actually my cholesterol was fine. So he goes, yeah, your cholesterol is fine. So, we're going to, you can have the meat part of the burger. I'm like, the meat part? What's going to hold the mustard? So it's just kind of, so I called the endocrinologist. I radically changed my diet. So then of course I felt terrible, right? I mean, cause I'm eating only meat and cheese.
Yeah. Your stomach gets a little upset.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did your stomach not do okay with that?
No, my energy level just tanked.
Oh, okay.
But I got, he hooked me up with a meter. So take metformin and here's a meter. So I started taking the metformin. I called the endocrinologist and now I'm checking my blood sugar with a meter, twice a day, 3 times a day. So I'm religiously 3 times a day checking my blood sugar and it's 300, 250. I'm like, oh, it's 250. That's great. It's low.
Coming down. I'm fascinated that he was pretty certain you didn't have type 2 diabetes, but gave you metformin and didn't know that if he sent you to the hospital, you'd leave the hospital with insulin. It's like he knew some of it, but not enough of it.
Right. Yeah. I think he just really did not want to. Well, he really wanted me to go to this endocrinologist. And I'm like, well, I called the endocrinologist and they said they said they have an appointment available in 6 weeks. And so I called him back and I'm like, can this wait 6 weeks? I was kind of, at this point I was scared, right? Because I'm like, oh God, right. I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do. I've read stuff on the internet. I've watched the YouTube videos. I'm like, what am I gonna, what does this mean? So he calls the endocrinologist and gets me an appointment for a week later. And he goes, come back to my office. I went back and then he gives me Lantus. So he's like, the blood tests that I ran show that you have autoimmune diabetes. So that's type 1. And he talked about the blood tests and told me what it was. And, so he said, okay, so take a shot, take 10 units of this once a day at bedtime, which is the same thing that they told your other guest, Carrie, which is funny because when I heard her story, I was like, wow, that is super similar.
Well, why? And also oddly, why not in the morning? Like, why tell you to take insulin that you're not 100% sure how it's going to work on somebody and then tell them to go to sleep? That seems weird to me too.
Yeah, it's super scary now. Yeah. And there's another super scary thing about this that happened, which is I asked him, I said, I've heard that people on insulin can go low when they're exercising. Is that possible? And he said, no, this is such a low amount of insulin that you cannot go low on this. So I'm like, oh, okay. And I should have said, you know what? Hold my beer.
Yeah. Are you certain? Because I bet you I can. Tell me something now. What's your basal rate now that you're on a pump?
What is my basal rate? Oh, my basal rate. Yeah, I'm a half a unit an hour.
Half a unit an hour. So you're getting about 12 units of basal a day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, he might not have been far off, but still, it's not the point. Like, when somebody gets diagnosed and they go to the hospital, you get put on an insulin drip, you get brought down very slowly. They get you level and then they start working on insulin. You just don't throw it in. And, I don't know. It sounds like your doctor knew enough to be dangerous and not enough to help you. It's interesting. And that's not uncommon. It's not even a dig on him. It just is, or her. It just is how it it's how it goes, really. So did you get low off your 10 of Lantus? I imagine you did, because now you're low.
Yeah, right away. Yeah. So
you're eating low carb too, right?
Well, yeah. So I'm eating no carbs. Now I'm eating no carbs. And, my pancreas is still kind of working a little bit, I mean, it was still kind of honeymooning kind of period. And so I'm eating no carbs. I'm trying to run. So what happened was I got I think I had been on it 1 or 2 days, and I managed to run about 1.5 miles away from the house. And I'm feeling bad. Right. So I get my meter out. I have my meter with me. I get my meter out, I test my blood. I'm like, crap, it says 55.
That's lower than 250.
I'm like, okay. So I didn't know what to do. I'm like, I don't think I can make it back to the house. Mm-hmm. And of course, I didn't have any sugar with me. Of course.
Just didn't know what you were doing. Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. And he told me I couldn't get low. So.
Right. It was he's like he hands you a 22 and goes, it's just a 22. You probably can't kill yourself with this. Good luck. And you were like, oh yeah, watch this. What did you do? Did you call an Uber or did you call your friend?
Called my husband. Yeah. I called my husband to come get me, come get me. I told him where I was. He came and got me. And I'm like, and bring so I didn't think I could eat carbs. So I was like, bring bacon or cheese. I don't know. I told him bring some kind of thing with no carbs in it. Right.
I'm sorry. This is not funny. And yet I can picture your husband rummaging around for a cheese stick or something in the refrigerator before he goes to pick you up, probably thinking to himself, like, what is happening? And scared. And did he come with cheese? Please tell me.
Yeah, he did. He did. He brought cheese and a carrot or something. So the carrot was probably a good idea.
I'm laughing. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I look back on that because now, when I run or swim or bike or do anything, I am,
You don't bring a carrot with you?
Well, I don't bring a carrot. I bring my Skittles. I bring my goo. I bring, Gatorade. I mean, I would never, do this. I mean, oh my God. So yeah, so it was super, I just didn't know what I was doing.
I just laughed so hard my nose ran. I'm sorry. I don't know why. Like the vision of this poor guy, you're sitting on the sidewalk and he's digging around frantically for probably the last thing in the world that's going to help you, bringing it like it's the Messiah lifesaver for you, And he's like, here's cheese, which doesn't even have meat in it. So it's not like you could eat it and later turn it into glucose. It would just go in there forever and sit there.
It was just fat. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, I think he might have brought a carrot or something, but it was like something else that would take a long time. A lot of fiber. So it would take forever.
Have neither of you ever seen a movie where somebody gets low blood sugar? That's my next question.
Only Steel Magnolias, right?
Yeah. It's like he didn't bring you orange juice or something like that. All right. So, okay. Well, that's insane. How do you make it to the endocrinologist then?
Yeah. So I get to the endocrinologist and they're like, and they were great. They were like, okay, so yes, we're going to keep you on the Lantus. They gave me, so I'm on the pins, right? So they're like, but no mention was made of bolusing, right? I mean, nothing. They didn't say bolus. They didn't say honeymoon. I had to find out about honeymoon on my own, but they did, a real thorough checkup and, check my blood sugar at that time. And I don't know. I mean, I guess, they helped me in some ways, but in other ways they didn't. So one thing they did tell me right away, which of course by this point I already knew, is they're like, oh, if you get low, eat sugar, eat fast sugar, and then they explained to me what that was. But, I still didn't meet with a diabetes educator. I've never met with a diabetes educator, which is just everything that I have learned, I had to learn on my own. Mm-hmm. So I went home, I watched YouTube videos, I read stuff online. I started listening to your podcast, which I accidentally found because I don't have any friends. Nobody I knew had this.
Yeah.
Right.
How did you accidentally find the podcast real quick, just so I know how to make other people accidentally find it?
Oh, well, I found it online. So I was doing an online search, and then I found Arden's Day, the Juicebox Podcast website.
Good.
And then I'm like, oh, there's a podcast.
Gotcha. I'm just reminding myself to keep my search engine optimization up. Okay. Because that's how you found it. That's how you Googled it and found it, because it has the site has strong SEO, so it pops up earlier in searches like that simply. You live in California, right? You said?
Yeah.
You're not from there though, are you?
No. Can you tell where I'm from my
I want to say you're from somewhere between Texas and North Carolina, in that space.
Yeah, that's a good guess. In the South. Okay. Yeah. I'm from Texas originally. Okay. Yeah. I'm from Dallas.
And so you don't speak like you're from California. I mean, you do a little bit. It feels like you took Texas and ran it through like a scrubber a couple of times, is how it feels. But also you don't speak, the people who are from California talk quickly like people from the East Coast. And you don't have that as much. So I was like, that's not where she's from. But I don't know why I care about that. Probably just to make myself feel like, oh wow, you were right, Scott.
Yeah, people ask me about that a lot, actually. I mean, I've lived here for 25 years, but I'm originally, but I came here as an adult to California. So I grew up in Texas.
You're just a blend. And I would say, I would have guessed you've lived in California for a long time, but but my point is that you're not going to like a free clinic on the same street with like a methadone clinic, right? Like you're going to a doctor's office that you would imagine you'd be getting some sort of valuable information from.
I really wish that now, of course I have great insurance. So, I really wish that they had sent me to the hospital, because if they had, my general doctor, if he had just sent me to the hospital that day that he was thinking about that, that would have helped a lot. I would have gotten a ton of information and help.
And how much time passed between that moment and when you started getting it together?
Probably a couple weeks.
Would you, looking back, would you describe that time as stressful, painful? Like, how would you think of it? It
was pretty stressful. I was scared because I didn't know. I knew I didn't know what I was doing. I knew I needed help, and I did not know the best way to get it. I did not know what I needed to insist on. So all I knew to do was to educate myself. So I actually read a couple of books in that time period too, which helped. And then, I did stuff, online, you always got to be so careful because sometimes stuff is just stupid online, but the YouTube videos helped, right? Okay. I mean, I was really stressed. I was kind of sad and scared that I had this. But I'm like on YouTube, I go to YouTube and I'm like, oh, well, if diabetic Danica can be this cheerful and cute and, be informative, well, I guess I could probably survive this. I mean, I had to kind of really, I just remember being hopelessly distracted, like I couldn't work. I really couldn't do much with the family. I was really focused on this for a couple of weeks, but at the end of it, I knew what I wanted. So when I got to the endocrinologist, they were like, yeah, you have type 1 and blah, blah, blah. And they were explaining it. And I'm like, I want a Dexcom. Can I get the G6?
Right.
And they were like, oh, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. And I'm like, nope, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Yeah. If my insurance will pay for it, then I want this. And they were like, okay, well, since you're running and all that, sure. So I got the Dexcom right away. I mean, like, I think I was maybe 6 weeks in. I had a Dexcom.
Real quick. That's excellent. Yeah. And because you educated yourself and you pushed for it and you thought, if there's a girl on YouTube that can be bubbly about this, then why can't I be happy too?
Yeah. I was like, look at all these people on YouTube. They're like living normal lives. Yeah. They're fine. You know,
is there a rocket flying slightly to the left right now because of how distracted you were?
Maybe. I don't know. You know, so far they haven't linked it to me. If so,
we were trying for Mars and we hit Venus. That was weird. What happened? Lorie got the diabetes a couple of years ago.
Yeah, diabetes. You know.
Oh my gosh. Well, good for you. I mean, honestly, being serious, the amount of effort that you needed to put into it. Like, listen, we could say everybody should put that kind of effort in, but everyone's not going to put that kind of effort in. You're a success story, and and you have to understand that most people don't end up having that success. They fall apart somewhere through, you know, you keep throwing roadblocks up in front of people and telling them, you know, you're the doctor, you understand, and things start going badly for them. They just imagine that's life. And then you lose those people, and maybe some of them never find their way out of it again. You're a studious person to begin with, so you just kind of turned that onto diabetes and picked your way through it. But of all the things that you found, I'm the best thing, right?
You're one of the best things, because
damn it, Lorie,
what you have taught me is that, you know, it's timing and amount. Mm-hmm. That's a big one.
Yeah.
And, you know, and also, you know, you might develop rules for yourself for different things, but always be questioning that and gathering data. Mm-hmm. And you can either write it down if you can't remember, or keep it in your head. But basically, you know, try to pull all of your experience together to help figure out what to do when you're low or high, or when you're faced with a food that's difficult.
Right.
And I still make a ton of mistakes, but it's a lot easier when you don't feel like, well, the doctor said I can't correct for this correction. Mm-hmm. I mean, well, I'm 300 and because I overcorrected my low, and now I've got, I guess, according to the doctor, I have to sit here for 4 hours, you know, before it'll slowly start to drop down by itself. Why do that to your, you know, why is that the rule? Don't make that the rule. So I mean, that's, well,
I'm glad.
A really,
I really am.
Significant thing.
It shouldn't look. Yesterday was Easter. The day before, I got up in the morning, and I got an email from a woman about a week or so ago, and she's like, "I have a 4-year-old. You know, I'm in trouble here. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me?" And I thought, she hit all my heartstrings, like, you know. And I was getting ready to say, sure, like, send me your number. I'll call you. I can talk you through it. And instead I said, can I talk you through it while we record it? And she said, yeah, sure. So Saturday morning, I talked to her for 45 minutes or an hour. And I tried really hard to just talk to her the way I would have spoken to her on the phone. Not like, you know, because when you're on the podcast, you're trying to be polite, because there are different people in the world. You're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. But if I'm talking to you one-on-one, I'm incredibly direct, which you may be thinking, oh God, Scott, are you not being direct on the podcast? There's more direct, but you know, like I'm incredibly direct. And so I got on with her. I tried to put it out of my head that I was recording myself. I walked her through it, and I said, all right, send me your CGM. I'm going to watch it, and then we'll get back together in a couple of days, which we're going to do, I think, tomorrow or the next day. And we'll record again just for 20 minutes to kind of button it up. Well, it turned out, as I'm talking to her, their son isn't just 4 and hasn't just not, you know, had diabetes for just a handful of months, but he's also autistic and not that verbal. And, you know, she's got a lot of other challenges going on. And I am going to tell you that I made a small adjustment to the kid's basal insulin, kid's MDI. I explained to her how to pre-bolus the meals, because she's like, I can't pre-bolus. And I was like, yeah, you can. And I told her how to do it. And the chart that I looked at this morning when I woke up versus the one I saw on Saturday it just could be two different people. And so if it can be explained to a tired, exhausted, scared mother of a 4-year-old autistic kid who's had diabetes for 5 months by my dumbass in an hour, then someone else ought to be able to accomplish that for a person like you, 49 years old, standing in a doctor's office. That's all I'm saying. If that's unreasonable, I'm unreasonable. But I think it's just everyone's not trying hard enough. Seriously. I mean, how the fuck can I do it and your doctor can? Lorie, I missed 52 days of my senior year of high school. You understand what I'm talking about, right? Like we ain't getting the space on me is what I'm saying. That isn't happening.
I make my own, I am bold enough I make my own basal changes. I'll calculate it myself. My endocrinologist was like, "Oh, you made your own changes." I'm like, "Yeah, because here's what's happening. Here's my calculation. Here's what I figured out. Does that seem right to you?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's what I would have done. So yeah, we're good." But actually, anybody can do it. It's not even hard.
Well, I'll tell you,
but you have to know that you can, that you should, that you need to ask or push even for it.
You know what else is hard for people? It's the duplication of percentages. I'm not saying that wrong, but there's something about the multiplier that throws people off. So I'm helping a friend right now. So it's somebody I know personally whose, teenage kid has it, and kid's about 130 pounds. And I'm talking to him. They got the basal at 0.45. I'm like, that doesn't seem right to me. So a kid in his teens growing 130 pounds. I'm like, I don't understand how 0.45 could be enough insulin, And they were like, well, yeah, the doctor said we can move, like we tried to move it up a little bit. I was like, how far did you move it? They move it like 0.1 at a time. And I was like, I don't know. I'd make the basal like 1 unit an hour and let's see what happens. Like, I'm like, let's just try it and see what happens this afternoon. And, it was because it was more than double. I might as well have said, you know what we should try? Let's hit him in the head with a sledgehammer and see if that fixes it. Like, she was scared out of her mind when I said 1 unit. And I think it's something about the multiplier. Like, if I would have said 0.6, I think that she could have handled. But you know what I mean? But that happens to a lot of people. Somehow, like, oh, that's twice as much. And I'm like, yeah, but if he needs it, it's not twice as much. It's the amount he needs. And lifelong type 1s fight with that too. Like, I'm going to find a way to have a conversation just about this. The idea of, I think of myself as a bad diabetic if I'm using too much insulin. Well, how much is too much? I don't know. More than this amount. So they use a little bit, have higher blood sugars and a higher A1C, but for some reason feel fulfilled because they didn't use much insulin. And then if you get them to use more insulin, then they're like, oh, this feels weird. There's a guy that was on the show a long time ago who I know won't mind me mentioning his name, who just went through this again. Donnie, he's fantastic, right? He's had diabetes a long time. He's an adult. And he told me when we were messaging privately, he's like, it seems like so much. I have to get over that it feels like I'm using too much insulin. You're using the amount that your body needs. That's that. Yeah, I'm not encumbered by that, but a lot of people are.
Yeah, people have been scared to death, I guess. So this obviously didn't happen to me when my doctor's like, oh yeah, here's some Lantus, you're fine. Just go run. Mm-hmm. But I guess, people who actually, got educated and had help, got scared out of their wits about it. And that's one of the things that I'm not afraid of, and I guess because I had to educate myself on this, because I'm not all that afraid of it. I'm like, well, if my basal's too high, I'm going to notice in the middle of the afternoon when I'm drifting down for no particular reason. It's hours after I've eaten. It's hours before I'm going to eat, and I'm drifting down. Why would that be? Well, probably my basal's too high.
Yeah.
I'm not. Or I'm drifting down in the middle of the night, right? So you're going to know. But see, I guess, I've never been so low that and maybe this is because, I had a CGM so quick, I'm I'm
You
not
feel
afraid
like
of
you're on
it.
top. I have to say, you're low, 91, 2 arrows down. You've only had diabetes for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
You were incredibly calm. Are you alone in your house right now?
No, because my son's still doing virtual school, so he's upstairs, and my husband's working from home too, so he's
Okay.
upstairs.
But you were incredibly calm. Like, what is your blood sugar now? 90?
It is 107.
Yeah, good. I mean, 90, 95, 100 right there. You're perfect. Like you handled it really well. Most people would have eaten everything. Those arrows, they would have been like, and then they just would have, most people would be in a situation right now, their blood sugar would be 250, 1 arrow up.
Ugh.
And then you can't get away from that. But your point is good, which is that, you got it as an adult, you understood the concepts quickly enough. And so you're not running, and you haven't had a bad low, so you're not afraid. And that's not to disrespect people who lived with this prior to this technology, who are always just going to have that memory of, I passed out in a restaurant. You know what I mean? Like, how are they going to get out? How are they going to shake that? I wouldn't know how.
Yeah. I mean, you would have, post-traumatic stress disorder
100%.
from that, I would think, because that would just be, that would be pretty horrible. Yep. I mean, I've had low lows, and I have eaten the kitchen before.
Right.
I've done that. It's just.
Do you think the bolus afterwards?
Oh yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm now diagonal arrow up. So now it's time to bolus right away.
That's a big leap. A lot of people can't make that leap.
But I mess it up. I make a lot of mistakes. So maybe that helps, but I don't know.
But I make a lot of mistakes. You're not afraid to make the mistakes and try to figure it out the next time.
Well, you can always, with the CGM, it just gives you a lot of latitude. Mm-hmm.
No, it does.
I just really feel like that allows me, I would not be doing all of this stuff without a CGM at all. I would be a lot more conservative. So I don't have to be.
Good for you. Well, that's, for anybody who can afford it or get their insurance to cover it or whatever, it would be my absolute advice to get a CGM. Like, it makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah.
It really does. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you were hoping to talk about?
I guess the only, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm signed up for Ironman in November. So I'll be doing an Ironman this year. So I've started training for that. And so really, they talk about how triathlon's 3 disciplines, right? You have the swim, the bike, and the run. I got swim, bike, and run. And now I have diabetes. So I really have 4 disciplines in this because I've got to be on top of it for the entire race. Right. So if you're not familiar, Ironman is a 2.5 mile or 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, followed by a marathon. And you do that in one day. So I have a lot of challenges ahead of me. So I have to people have done this with diabetes. So, and some of them have done it successfully. And I am going to try to do it this year, hopefully.
Have you ever done it before?
No, not a full. I've done halves. I've done marathons, and I've done half Ironman races.
Why are you doing it? Like, just to prove it to yourself, or because you want the tattoo? Which is it exactly?
I don't know. I might get the tattoo. Actually, mostly because I just want to see if I can do it. It's an interesting physical challenge, Oh, it is. All the other races are too, but this is even longer and harder, and it's going to be a really big challenge with diabetes. Mm-hmm. Hopefully I won't have to curb sit, which occasionally happens still, where you have to sit down. You've had too much insulin on board when you left the house. You're going to sit on the curb until your blood sugar comes back up and eat Skittles. But,
what pump are you using? Are you using a T-Slim?
Yeah, I have a T-Slim, and Yeah. Yep.
Did you want to
And
ask?
the disc.
Because you mentioned that you had to disconnect at one point. So I was like, okay, tubed pump. And then I just thought,
Yeah.
Rocket Lady, she's going to have a T-Slim, not a Medtronic. That was my thought process that got me to ask that.
Yeah. I do like the T-Slim, but
Okay.
I do disconnect to swim.
Okay.
I've actually swam with it before, which they tell you not to do, but it's no problem.
Okay.
Don't tell them I said that.
Well,
but
I'm not saying that out loud.
Waterproof.
Any of you people jump in a pool with your T-Slim and it stops working, it's not my fault. You call Lorie.
It's not my fault either.
Yeah. You call. I'm not saying that. I've never heard that before. Don't blame me. Thank you. Goodbye. No, I didn't know you. So what do they call it? Waterproof, not water, or what is it? I forget.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the terms mean exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's more than splash proof, I guess is what I want to say.
All right.
You submerge it, it's going to be okay. Or mine was. Maybe it was accidentally okay.
They call it watertight IPX7, tested to a depth of 3 feet for up to 30 minutes. This is from support.tandemdiabetes.com.
Well, I've tested it longer than that for deeper than that. So it's okay.
They're just talking about like it's peace of mind for their pump in the event of an accidental submersion. So yeah.
Yeah.
But Lorie's just like, whatever. I shoot.
Well, I've not dropped it in the toilet, but I'm sure that's what they were thinking of.
That kind of an idea. Well, yeah, you're right. That it probably is what they were thinking of. Like, how do we keep this thing safe for when it takes a swim real quick? That's interesting. Okay. I'm sorry. So you're going to try this Ironman. How do you practice for it? How do you try to see if you can?
Well, I have a long training plan. So, the training plan is just like anybody else's training plan. There's nothing special, but I need to be able during the race to eat and bolus because I can't, I can't go the entire day, even though it's intense exercise and long endurance exercise. I will have to eat. You can't go all day without eating. And I'm also going to have to bolus. But the bolus is really different, right? So, it's, so I have a lot of things in my training plan that are extra that I put in there. For example, long hikes. I put a couple of long hikes, that are, what I call urban hikes, because I live near Los Angeles. So what's easier is just to walk out the door and walk down the street, walk for 5 hours. But the idea is that I can practice and figure out how much less bolus to give myself to account for the exercise. Mm-hmm. With basal by itself, I know what to do because I have on my pump, I've programmed in reduced basal for exercise that I do, that's shorter, that's like on a regular daily basis. Mm-hmm. But I need to know how I can bolus when I'm in the middle of activity so that I don't over bolus myself or under bolus myself.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, so that if you are going to have a situation where there's active insulin, that it doesn't happen while you're in a body of water too. Well,
for the swim, yeah. So I kind of know what to do at the beginning of the swim because that's first. Luckily, that's first because I won't have my pump with me. I'll have my Dexcom, but I won't get readings. So with the swim, I pretty much know I've done that swim distance before by itself. So I know what to do with that, but it's what I am most worried about really is, I'm worried about, the really long bike ride. I'm going to eat like a sandwich, maybe twice on the bike, like a small piece of a sandwich, not a big honkin' hoagie or anything, but like a little sandwich. And, I'm going to have to bolus and I need to figure out, well,
how much is the
I had protein, had sugar. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. So you're just going to go out and go on like kind of intensive hikes and try to test them there.
Yeah. And the long bike rides. There's training bikes and runs that are really long. And I did a 50K run once. And for that, I just kind of snacked the whole time. And so I actually did have to bolus a couple of times I was just correcting. I was just responding instead of thinking ahead. So I wasn't pre-bolusing. I was eating Cheetos. So I found out, okay, I can eat like 8 or 10 Cheetos, the crunchy ones. I could pop those in, eat those, and then, maybe 30 minutes later, I could watch what's happening. And then I would correct a little bit, not what I would normally correct if I was sitting.
Mm-hmm.
So that I'm going to have to figure out on. And so I've planned in hikes that will help me do that. I think also the long bike rides, there's lots of long bike rides where, it's like between 3 and 6 hour bike rides. There's a lot of those in the training plan. So for those, I'll be eating and trying to experiment. And then there's also long runs in the training plan. So I'll be training, I'll be trying to figure out how to eat with those as well. Wow. And so it's going to be kind of, I don't know, other people have kind of done something similar. I've learned from, one of my internet searches led to type 1 run. So some of the people that I know there and on their Facebook page, I was able to kind of get a little bit more information about what other people do for long distance training and racing. Mm-hmm. And, they're kind of doing the same thing. They're kind of, they're like, well, I experimented with this, or, they may have had other people that said, here, try do this, do this, do this. When you get out of the water from the swim, bolus the missed basal. If you don't, you're going to spike, even though you're on the bike, even though you're adrenaline is cranking, and also you've been without basal for that time, put it right there, bolus.
So I would be interested to listen. I am never doing an Ironman. I think you're insane. So keep that in mind. Okay. But, okay. But I would be inclined to talk about, like, how do you tempt the basal back prior to the swim so that you create a black hole of basal during the swim, so that when you come out of the water, the basal is immediately back already. And there's a way to do that with timing. Does that make sense to you? So if you're going to swim from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., I'm making up a number.
Okay. Yeah. For 2 hours. Yeah.
Right?
2 hours.
Then I would turn the basal back at 12 p.m. so that it has time to titrate back, so that by the time 1 p.m. comes, you don't have any impact from the basal. And then I'd let that run, that temp basal, I'd let it run from 12 to 1 to maybe 2 or 2:30, and then have it come back on, so that by the time it titrates back up again, you're out of the water at 3. Like, that's how it would occur to me. I have no idea if that's right or not. But if you asked me to make a plan for that, that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that would be maybe a good thing to do. I don't, there might be a better way to do it so that you don't get a spike.
And you're not doing the rob Peter to pay Paul thing. You're just
right.
You're just kind of So I think of doing that as creating a pothole or a black hole in the future. So you take the basal away now so that it's completely gone in the future when the expected impact is coming. And that way you kind of just sort of float like in a suspension tank instead of dropping down.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing there there's no insulin there to pull down. So while your body's trying to, because of the activity, drop your blood sugar, there's no insulin there. So your blood sugar can't drop because there's just none there, or it can't drop as drastically.
Right.
And then, but you have to have it come back on, because, when you set a temp basal increase at noon, even if you made it a 150% increase, you're not going to start getting the impact from it for a half an hour or more, because it still just builds up slowly. So you can take it away slowly, create the black hole, put it back in before the swim is over, so that the black hole's gone by the time you come out of the water. That's how I think of it. Like, I actually thought what you talked about with the swimming this morning, it sounded like you found a way to get through it, but that's not how I would have done it.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's probably, I'll have to think about how to do that.
Think about it like pre-bolusing. So,
Yeah.
right. So you pre-bolus a meal at 12 because the insulin's going to start working around 12:15 and it's really going to start pulling around 12:20, 12:25, and you're going to begin to eat at, I don't know, 12:15. So you put the insulin in early so the insulin gets a head start so that when the food starts impacting, the insulin's already up to power. With a bolus for activity like this, you take the basal away so that the basal's not there, so that when the impact of the activity comes, there's nothing there to add to that drop. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's good. Let me figure out how to get that done. But yeah,
it'll take trial and error.
If it could fire up, I can swim with the pump. I have a little waterproof bag thing. I can swim with it. If I could swim with it, I could probably get it to.
You also don't necessarily need it during that time either, because if you temp down before, right, then you could then you could bastardize these two ideas. You could temp down before, bag the pump when you swim, which is I'm assuming what you end up doing with it, and then swim with it off, and then get out, hook it up, and do a bolus instead of a temp basal. Instead of the basal coming back on before the swim is over, just put the bolus in. You'd probably get a similar thing there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what you figure out. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'll experiment with that because even the short swims, I always have a spike and I know it's coming. So I always
you have the spike afterwards.
Yeah, I get a spike afterwards.
Because
so I
you're
know
taking
it's
insulin
coming
away while you're swimming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. There's a way. Look, it won't be easy to figure out, but there's a way in there somehow, because in the end, all you're trying to do is put the insulin you need in the places where you need it.
Right.
That's it. That's all you're trying to do. I kind of think like an engineer, Lorie. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I'm taking that as a bonus and we're stopping the episode right here. That's it. I take that. That's it. That's my trophy. What do you think of that? Anyway, we're having a nice time talking. So we're running in the fear place of going on forever. We've been talking for an hour and a half, but I want to thank you very much for doing this. And, I tell you that your stories is different than most people's. And, I really appreciate you sharing it, especially and I know all the people who have had this happen to them appreciate it as well, because the notes I get from them are, they seem kind of desperate to hear from somebody that's in their situation. So thank you very much.
Yes. Well, thank you very much too. It was my pleasure for sure to talk on the podcast.
I appreciate this. I really do. Plus now I'm basically 2 NASA people in. I'm kicking ass on that.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
I'm doing great. I also think what you do is really cool. So, I appreciate, I love that there are people wondering about things that are so much, bigger than just the day-to-day stuff. So it's very
well, cool. Thanks. Yeah. I do too.
Yeah, no kidding. I think it's amazing. Well, first I have to thank Lorie for being very, very, very patient. 13 months later, this is Lorie's episode. Thank you very much, Lorie. I am very sorry. I'd also like to thank InPen from Medtronic Diabetes and remind you to go to InPentoday.com to learn more about the InPen, to find out how much it could cost, and to get started. After that, you can go to contournext.com/juicebox and get the best darn little blood glucose meter that I've ever used. contournext.com/juicebox. And if you get the chance and you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 or cares for someone with type 1, head over to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and take the survey. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.